Gaming rebooted back with another top 10 list. This time it's the top 10 gaming facts you probably didn't know. Like, did you know that the symbols on the PlayStation controller all have different meanings? Or that the earliest known Easter egg in video games is in the 1973 classic game Moonlander. Neither of those facts appear on this list, so I don't even know why I brought them up. But anyways, before we start, let me just state that although this is a top 10, the facts in this list don't actually appear in any particular order, just in the order that I wrote them down when researching for this video. With that being said, let's get started.
10.
Counter-Strike was initially a mod you could play in Half-Life. Yes, that's right, one of the biggest PC games to ever exist started life as a mod for Half-Life. In 1999, Min Lee and Jess Cliff created the first version of Counter-Strike in a custom map in Half-Life. By 2000, the pair had gone through 5 beta releases and created a website which drew attention from Half-Life's developers to buy them out and hire them to create a full version of Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike then became one of the most influential first-person shooter games of all time, developing many of the FPS game mechanics found in nearly all modern shooters today. From Call of Duty to Valorant, without this mod, FPS shooters might not be as popular as they are today. Maybe Call of Duty wouldn't be on a downward slope of self-destruction and utter disappointment as they squeeze every last breath of life from such a beloved franchise, rather than just letting it die out peacefully. Okay, so I may have gone slightly off track there, and my feelings for cut aside. We have to thank Half-Life for the memories we have of 9-year-olds giving us abuse after a game of Team Deathmatch back on Modern Warfare 2.
9.
Street Fighter name switches. This one gets a little complicated, so try to pay attention, or at the very least, try to stay awake. In the Japanese version of Street Fighter 2, the boxer character who we know today as Balrog is actually called M.bison. This was intended to be a reference to Mike Tyson, and the big bad we know as m.bison is called Vega in Japan. With the Spanish Matador's name being Balrog, these names were all switched around in international versions of the game due to fears of a lawsuit from Mike Tyson's representatives. When the game was released in America, this led to m.bison being called Balrog, Balrog having his name changed to Vega, and for Vega to become m.bison. I'm not sure as to why Vega was involved in the name switch. Some say it's because Vega didn't seem to fit the dictator role we know as m.bison, but for me it just complicates things even more.
8.
How Final Fantasy got its name. For this inspirational tale, there are 2 different stories out there regarding the truth, but they are basically the same story with just a slight change in either one. One is that Square was going bankrupt and thought this would be their last ever game, hence the name Final Fantasy, because this would be the Final Fantasy game they make. The other is that Sakaguchi was going to quit Square and go back to college, but he wanted to make one final game before he left the company. A game he had always dreamed of making, but never really got the chance to make. It was his fantasy and it was his final chance. Once again, hence the name. Either way, 35 years later and Final Fantasy is still going strong, with over 95 games in the series depending on how you count them and who you ask, because the number always seems to change. And currently at the time of writing this exact sentence, I'm 50 hours deep into Final Fantasy 15 and just finished a playthrough of Final Fantasy 13 and its sequels.
7.
Sega Dreamcast was the first online console. When it comes to online gaming consoles, most people seem to think it's a recent trend. Thinking about online gaming at home before the Xbox 360 had kids and grown men arguing with each other because they died in a game, most people assume you had to be a PC gamer to play online with friends, but online gaming at home has been possible since way back in 1999 when Sega released the Dreamcast. Personally, one of my favourite consoles ever made. The only problem being I knew more people with a Sega Dreamcast at home than I did with access to the internet.
6.
Mario started out life as Popeye. There are many interesting facts about your favourite chubby plumber, like how Mario wasn't even a plumber to begin with, but a carpenter, and there's many good theories out there that put up a strong argument about Mario being the bad guy, but nobody seems to talk about how Mario is in fact a knockoff version of Popeye the Sailor Man. Wanting to make a Popeye game, but yet unable to get the licensing rights to a Popeye game, Nintendo created a Bluto-like character and named him Donkey Kong, and Popeye then turned it into Jumpman. When the game hit America, the Nintendo team changed Jumpman's name to Mario after the company's warehouse landlord at the time. Mario now being the ultimate staple in video games and one of the most well-known gaming characters there is, it's interesting to think how if Nintendo got the rights to use Popeye, we would never have had the most famous line in gaming history.
It's me, Mario!
5,
World of Warcraft is used to understand epidemics. Back in September 2005, Blizzard's incredibly popular MMORPG experienced an unintended event when a damage effect called Corrupted Blood spread through thousands of players and left a lot of players in a never-ending death loop. Corrupted Blood was an attack Hackart the Soul Flayer would use during the first ever 20-man raid. The attack would damage players for 10 seconds and could spread to other players if they got too close in the fight. The only problem was when the fight ended, Corrupted Blood remained and players would leave the fight still infected and spread the debuff to players and their in-game pets all across the world. The way players reacted to this in-game bug caught the attention of epidemiologists who used the unplanned event to study how people react in times of a pandemic and how our actions can help spread the virus. Research on the Corrupted Blood outbreak is said to have helped understand and control the recent COVID outbreak in real life.
4,
Grand Theft Auto only exists due to a bug. Everyone's favourite crime sandbox game Grand Theft Auto began development as a game titled Race and Chase, in which players could either play as a racer or the police trying to catch said racers, hence Race and Chase. I know, right? Super creative. But there was a bug in the game in which whenever a police car got close to the racer, they would ram and crash into them, like their life depended on it, creating total carnage, which actually turned out to be as fun as it sounds, and the people working on the game decided to scrap the ability to become a cop and focus on the racer aspect, avoiding the crazed police and changing the game's name to Grand Theft Auto, which just goes to show sometimes the best parts of the game are the unintentional broken parts.
3,
E.T. is the worst video game of all time, but... Okay, so most people know the story of the infamously awful E.T. game, a game so bad they actually buried all the unsold copies in the desert. A story I find so fascinating I actually wrote a paper on it in college that helped me graduate. But did you know that E.T. actually outsold one of the most famous games ever made? Space Invaders was one of Atari's most popular games ever and is considered an icon of gaming, becoming a global phenomenon, yet only managed to sell around 1 million copies, which obviously back then was a crazy number, but E.T., the agreed upon worst game ever made, actually sold around 1.5 million copies, technically making E.T. a more popular game. And if you don't know the story behind the E.T. game, please go and watch some of the many videos on the subject. It's a fascinating part of gaming history and I guarantee you will not be bored.
2,
The PlayStation 1 was supposed to be a Nintendo console. Today we think of the console wars as PlayStation vs Xbox, with Nintendo hiding away in the corner. But back in the late 80s, early 90s, the console wars was between Nintendo and the sadly now forgotten Sega. An electronics company you may have heard of called Sony started working on a deal with Nintendo to create a disc-based add-on for the Super Nintendo, and that add-on alone could have won the console wars for Nintendo forever and changed the way we see gaming today. But the deal fell through, with reports suggesting neither side was truly happy with the deal, with Sony believing video games was nothing more than just a fad, and Nintendo believing video game cartridges being superior to the CD-ROM. The deal now fallen through, Sony went to the other side and began talks with Sega to release a disc-based add-on for them, but once again talks stalled and the deal fell through again. But instead of giving up on the idea, Sony decided to turn the disc-based add-on into a console of their very own. And so the PS1 was born, and with it a legend was created. Now, one of the biggest video game companies in the world, I wonder just how many sleepless nights Nintendo gets thinking about what could have been. Also Sega too, I guess, considering they ended up going bust and practically don't exist anymore. All hail the PlayStation.
1,
Devil May Cry started life as Resident Evil 4. Have you ever played Devil May Cry and thought, damn, Dante looks so familiar? Well, that's because Dante started out life as the iconic Leon S. Kennedy from the Resident Evil series. In fact, Devil May Cry actually began development as Resident Evil 4, with a switch from the classic survival horror zombie style that made Resident Evil famous, to become more action orientated and switching zombies for demons, but the staff felt that this new approach didn't fit in well with the previous Resident Evil games and decided to simply rebrand the game Devil May Cry, while still keeping Leon as the main antagonist and simply changing his name to something more suited for the new style, and hence Dante was born. Resident Evil 4 on the other hand went back to focusing on zombies, just with a bit more of the action from Devil May Cry thrown in. So from one game that could have possibly killed a beloved franchise, we actually got two amazing games, one continuing the legacy of Resident Evil series, and the other one starting its own iconic franchise just as loved as Resident Evil itself, with Leon technically taking the starring role in both games. And with that we conclude our list. How many of the facts did you already know? Which ones did you find most interesting? And is there any interesting game facts you know that's not on this list? Let me know in the comments. I have been James from Gaming Rebooted, and this has been the top 10 interesting game facts you probably didn't know. Thanks for watching.